Sport and combat have almost always intertwined from as long as we know. This social paradigm, with society placing fervor on the game to the intensity of war, dates back to a time unrecorded, feeling life or death implications on defeat or success. In ancient Sparta, soldiers would commonly participate in sports and felt it a good training for the sort of skills needed in war. It is with this fire in the belly that the ultimate passion play, association football, has become more than just a beautiful game, but a life for supporters and players alike. Played on every continent, in every corner of the globe, the sport has found itself into events everywhere. From the trenches of World War I, where soldiers laid down their arms for a single, fleeting match in no man's land, to political protests and uprisings on the pitch, football has been both a symbol of resistance and a tool of propaganda. It's a language that transcends borders, but also a battlefield where battles for identity, power, and pride are fought. From the infamous football war between Honduras and El Salvador, to the role of football in the conflicts of the Balkans, and the hope that it brings refugees around the globe. We see how this game we love has reflected, and sometimes even shaped, the course of history. Therein, a Hungarian film, and later its English-speaking remake, sought to marry these two emotive engines into a parable of glory and the game outlasting the indignity of battle. A soccer skirmish, which could serve as the premise for an 80s blockbuster, checking demographic boxes and involving real player and acting talent. So put on your headphones, lace up your boots, and get ready for a journey where the pitch and the battlefield meet. This month on Club Deportivo Movie Club, Victory.
Club Deportivo Movie Club. Come and join our movie club, where Cesar and Drew have fun. Club Deportivo Movie Club.
What is up, and welcome to Club Deportivo Movie Club. I am Drew Steck. I am your host here. Along with me is my partner in crime, and this friggin' game is going to kill the both of us someday, Cesar Hernandez.
Dude, Drew, that new intro with the images, whatnot, that was incredible. I love that. That was awesome. Sorry,
Thanks,
I just had to kick things off by saying that. That was incredible. Once again, as everybody knows, I am Cesar Hernandez. I just show up to talk every now and then, and Drew's the one who puts in all the effort into this thing. So I just shout out to Drew for that incredible intro. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, for those of you who are listening on audio, go check that out on YouTube. That was really cool. Yeah, so just wanted to quickly say that.
Yeah, there's visuals with the story. We try to tell a little, little tale before we jump into the film here today. I am recording my fourth of four recording locations. I think I moved every single episode. Cesar has been our rock. He has been in the same location each time with some great posters as well for you to check out visually. But that's the other advantage. You get to see where we're jumping around on the screen here. We have a pretty exciting film and everything for you today, as well as an amazing guest who, will level up our show, I think, a little bit here in terms of classiness. But Cesar, anything new in life, man? Any new anecdotes? I've got one little thing about the show that I heard that was interesting from a friend. But do you get anything?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that because that's definitely fascinating. No, just doing well. It's holiday season. I was texting Chiva and Tony the other day. I was like, you know what? I was jokingly telling them that there should be a San Diego football holiday party, right? Which obviously
Right.
our guest will be invited to. This party that I
Yeah,
just invented right now that literally doesn't exist.
it would definitely
But
happen. And we could do it in like a different season too. We could have a holiday party
yes,
that's a different holiday. That would also be kind of
yeah.
funny. That'd be more our style. But we should. We have a full. We got us. We've got Abe. There's a whole expanded
Oh
San
yeah.
Diego with the
Oh
football
yeah.
universe. So we should definitely have
Oh yeah.
some sort of party there to celebrate. And you know who we'd be inviting to that party? But I'll get to him in a second. Is one of our friends, Travis, PunkRock Paint, who shared with me a nice little anecdote that he ran into an old friend at 7-Eleven. Travis also does the art for the show. He's got a couple fun pieces here for us today, and then as well as anything happening with San Diego Punto Football. He's been pretty well involved in some of our art, which is awesome. But he met a friend outside of a 7-Eleven near his house, old friend from growing up. And this guy said, "You got to check out this podcast, man. It's got movies, it's got soccer." And Travis is like, "I'm in the credits, man. I'm here every week." So, yeah, Travis, shout out for everything that you do. And then also shout out
Yes,
to your friend. Thank you for listening. And
100%.
thank you to anybody who finds us here on YouTube or the San Diego Punto Football feed. And we'll have more things throughout the new year. We may get our own Blue Sky account. We may do that, Cesar. So that's exciting news to look forward to. But without any further ado, you've watched us struggle for long enough here. We're going to bring in a real pro on the mic, somebody who has shepherded me into the world of movie podcasts on his own movie podcast, Crossing Streams, and now hosts a radio show on 97.3 The Fan. Mr. Craig Elsten, what is up?
It is great to see you guys. Drew, Cesar, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. I was grateful to be invited onto the show. And as you're about to find out as well, this helped close a ridiculous loophole in my viewing that had somehow eluded me for low over 40 years. So our mutual friend Travis texted me today in advance of this. And when I told him that this was the first time I'd seen Victory, he said the first time he saw Victory was 1981.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
and I was like,
I don't know if he's
I
revisited it
could've-
either. I think he just watched it then.
yeah, I'm like, I could have. Dad did not take me to see Victory when I was 9 years old. And somehow I missed it all the way through, even though I had a connection to the movie later in life. So I'm really happy to be here and to share some thoughts with you guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Craig. Again, your show has been a great model for me on how to set this up in the first place. You covered everything. So if you ever want to, it's evergreen, as Craig likes to say. You can go back if you're rewatching the shows that are on his show. Highly recommended as companion listening. Really good place to check it out. And we'll do a similar breakdown here today of the film that we watched. But just to jump into it, what a weird kind of story that could only be told in the 80s, I think, in some ways. But when it comes to movies overall, I'd say, Craig, and just sports films, you cover all sports. You also have a great Padres podcast, Padres Hot Tub. You also have a radio show where you cover all types of sports, begrudgingly, I'm sure sometimes certain sports that you don't love as much, but you have to cover all of them. What was your relationship with sports and film, I'd say, coming up through the years?
Well, okay. Sports have been working in sports since 1996. And really, when I was a freshman in college, I was calling games at UCSD. When I was 16, I knew I wanted to do play-by-play. So, it's kind of been most of my adult life working in sports, much of that in radio, but about 15 years on the club sports side as well. So working on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, covering teams as well as working in front offices for teams like San Diego Sockers, announcing for the Gulls for a while. So, and now, back to the radio and hosting on 97.3, the Padres flagship on middays with Annie Halbern. It's great. So sports, that's that. My dad was a high school coach. I was never an athlete worth a shit, which probably, he would have preferred otherwise along the way. But I did love the games, whether I could play them well or not. And he taught me a lot about what it meant to think about sports and how things go beyond just, simply yay, score, boo, score allowed. So there's that, play-by-play makes you break things down. Soccer specifically, later to it in my life, growing up in Long Beach, we didn't really have anything super soccer at that time. I've worked for the San Diego Sockers mostly off and on since 2009. That introduced me hard into the indoor world. I can tell you anything about that you want. Along the way, outdoor came all the way along. Now I do PA for San Diego Wave FC. We've got a new MLS club in town. We talk soccer all the time on the radio, and I feel like I'm enmeshed in the San Diego soccer community, probably not the soccer community writ large, but the folks who know in town know who I am. And as to film, I always grew up a film kid, film, TV, whatever. All the ones that you were a teenager are the ones you remember for your entire life. And my podcast, Crossing Streams, from 2019 to 24 or whatever, covered streaming television mostly, but movies streaming as well. I don't call myself a film buff. I'm not the person who watches 40 movies a year, because I've always tried to keep up on the streaming television side more, and there's so much to watch, as you know. It's impossible to watch it all or even half of it. But I try to catch the best movies possible, at least a couple in a theater every year. And generally, I think sports movies are pretty mediocre, sometimes to bad, occasionally really good. So, spoiler alert, I was surprised that at least this one was watchable and fun.
It's a good way of putting it.
Right.
Actually, Craig, before we dive into it, I want to ask you really quickly, like, since you watched a number of movies, you watched a number of TV shows, was there a specific soccer related, or even if it's just like soccer tangent, like kind of like a movie or TV show that comes to mind when you think about stuff that you've liked?
I mean, the first soccer movie I remember really liking was Bend It Like Beckham.
Okay, yeah.
And, take that for what it is, but
That's a good movie. No, it's a good movie. I like that movie.
I'll also say that I thought when I was on an international trip, the Maradona documentary was one of the things available on the plane. And then I went back and watched that like 2 more times. I thought that was just an incredible, incredible work.
Yeah.
And so like sports documentary space, obviously there's so much great stuff done. When you get to the fictional space, not as much, but you guys have found the soccer.
we found like 70, I'd say, collective films, not all in English, obviously all over the world, but like that are fiction that have some level of staying power. Whether or not they're good, we'll find out. That's the premise of the show. To see, like, are they overall bad? Like, we're starting with the good, to be honest. The way we're doing this, we're taking the wheat, the chaff from the wheat here a little bit, and creating a show that's hopefully the best stuff a little bit up top, and then we'll sprinkle in some weird ones here and there. And I'm sure we'll find some ones that people don't know as much about. If we were trying to be super timely with choice, we could have done Joyo and Noel, which is about the game from the intro that happened at Armistice and around Christmas, in terms of the two sides leaving their trenches to play a game in the middle on Christmas Day, which is pretty cool and a lesson of peace, I think, that we all can take into the season. But also, like, not sure if it's fun or not, and that's kind of where we were leaning with this one. Was we wanted to go something fun, and this is also that one's not on the list, I would say, but on a lot of people's list, they rank this as the top soccer movie of all time, which I'm not sure we can get into the debate of that merit, but I think overall very fun, and I would say again one that combined it pretty well here as we transition to the film for today. But generally, the premise of soccer, I think, in a lot of sports, as you pointed out, Craig, just sports movies are sappy. There's usually tropes. We covered that in our first episode. Just a lot of how these tropes play out. It was like one long trope of a film, very fun still, and still a B+ or B rated movie. But you would say generally today, of the time that it's of, and trying to use the different pieces that it had to work with, I think that did a pretty outstanding job of telling a story that also coincided with a soccer story in a proactive manner. And that's where, again, I think we're happy as a podcast, but if we went to the documentary space, which maybe we'll have a Patreon someday, maybe we'll do something else, and that's where we'll cover docs or whatever. But there's so many, I'd say, better docs overall. If you're somebody who's like, where's the story at? That's where you can find out about individual clubs that you've never heard of. Sunderland Till I Die is one that I think a lot of Americans resonated with, to find out really what the culture feels like. But I'm done with my soapbox spiel on soccer and movies, but this is the back and forth here of the show today, is to determine these merits, I'd say, generally. Anything else to tag in on you guys? Otherwise, I would love to open it up to what we watched here.
Let's dive into it. Let's go.
Yeah. All right, let's go. So Victory, but in a font.
Wait, I watched the wrong movie.
Varsity Blues? Is this a different show?
Oh, come on,
Watch a totally different movie.
Because
I don't want it live.
Ali Larder, I mean, it might be worth it.
Maybe we do. Maybe we watch futbol on football movies again. The well is never dry with our show. We can go into different modes here. But yeah, Victory, or weirdly, 2-titled movie. Some films are like this, right? Where you get 2 titles for a movie that have both existed and both were released various ways. Sometimes either via digital home release, they'll change the title, or in different locations. I think is what happened here between England, the US, Italy and a few other countries where this was released internationally. It's known as Victory, just simply Victory. And there's like 5 to 10 other prescient movies at any time you look that have that title as well. Very common English word. And then you also have Escape to Victory, which is, if you're trying to narrow it down and find the film quicker, you can search for that, Escape to Victory, starring Sylvester Stallone and Michael Caine. In 1981, produced kind of on the back of, Rocky fame for Sylvester Stallone. You forget how young Michael Caine was at a time because he's been so old for so long, but young Michael Caine, which is pretty good, or youngish Michael Caine. I don't know if he's ever been truly young. An old soul, if you will, but it was kind of a production that looked at a few different things of how do we tell this story that a Hungarian production did in the 60s, where the ending was very different. We can talk through some of that as we hit those points. But the premise is the same, which is based on actually a Ukrainian story, where the Ukrainians were killed by Nazis who they played several matches against, and then once they eventually resisted, they were then shot, actually. And that's where, again, our story differs very much from that in a fun, positive 80s upbeat way. But it is a story of, prisoner of war camp that's trying to kind of be a comedy, and then weave in the soccer element as a way to unify these people from all over the world who are unified against a common evil, but in this movie are unified against a common team, which is the German team. So that is the general premise for our film in terms of how we open up and the stakes at which it was made. It was made with a decent Hollywood budget of about 12 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's 41.7 million. That's still a decent, really good, I'd say, output for the budget. And it made about 27.5 million, or 95 million adjusted for inflation, which, again, pretty decent return, little B movie. And it's turned into a cult classic over the years, where I think it's really found its staying power. Again, first time I viewed it was in preparation for this. I viewed it a couple times. Craig, sounds like you as well. Cesar, was this your first time seeing Victory or knowing of it?
Yeah. Oh, most stuff. I mean, this was I knew of the movie. I knew that Michael Caine was in it. I obviously knew that Pele was in it. But this was the first time I'd ever seen it. Like, I mean, it's just, it wasn't until, I don't know, I want to say once I got my 20s, I started to actually try to like make somewhat of an effort to watch some soccer movies. So because this one was from 1981, before I was born, obviously I wasn't really thinking twice about this. But yeah, watch it for the first time, and I will dive into it right here, but just, I don't think it's at the level of a Rude or a Corsi, but I definitely enjoyed it a little bit more than Goal. And even though I'm preparing I already told Drew, preparing a couple yellow cards coming up for a certain character, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless.
Well, for myself, I was quite surprised because I honestly thought this was going to be a very bad movie coming in. I had done a little bit of research and found out some of the history of the making of Victory, and it is a hilarious and sordid history in which essentially nobody involved with the product wanted to be, but got paid money to do it, and then weren't sure why they were there. John Huston is the director of Victory. It's like his 5th to final film that he ever directed. He directed The Maltese Falcon and Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Like, this is like one of the most old school, old time film directors of all time. And Sylvester Stallone, who got paid almost $2 million for this film, said that he only agreed to the project to work with John Huston, to which John Huston said he only agreed to the project because they gave him a truckload of money. And then Michael Caine at 47 was like, why are you casting me as somebody who was just out of playing in the EPL?
Yeah.
And he only wanted to do it because he got to work with Pele. And that's why he agreed to do the film, is because he got to work with Pele. And then Pele and all the players all hated Sylvester Stallone, despised him during his time on the set when he refused to come out for anything except 4 shots. He demanded to score the winning goal in the game in the original script and got shouted down off of that. Like, you're the goalkeeper, bro. Chill out. And instead he got to save a penalty. Right. So with all of this, they created a fairly brisk and entertaining film that had all the beats of 1981 that I found quite enjoyable.
It was really interesting too, because I was reading about it. They're saying that like Sylvester Stallone, this is on IMDb trivia, but said that he like antagonized his fellow cast and crew members by refusing to eat with them, and that he would often disappear like to London or Paris on a private jet, just leaving everyone behind.
Yeah.
in
Because he was
Hungary.
working
Yeah.
because he was working on Rocky 3. He was writing the script to Rocky 3, and he had to, keep absconding away because he was going to be the superstar of this giant project. And Victory was this movie he agreed to work on. And then I think he took like 2 looks at the set and all the soccer players who knew he was full of shit.
Yeah, I don't belong
just
here.
like-
I'm from Philly, man. We don't do this here. And they're in Budapest, Hungary, is where they filmed a lot of this, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
even back then, just kind of a different town. And for him was probably just like, yeah, I'd rather be in Paris or London, name brand Europe, in that sense for him. But yeah, I think it is interesting. They filmed it like in a field, mostly where the prisoner are working was. So it's like not a very glamorous set, but it seems like that's what John was going for, the director, in terms of like choosing this location. I think he was trying to foster that atmosphere, and then sounds like Sly just like cut right through the bottom of all that, which is want and known to do, as a personal character, and that's why he has a reality show now, I guess, where his daughters torment him all the time. So it's good for him. But overall, really decent production team. When you look at it, like you do have like a great director, you do have a decent script writer, or script team that put together at least something that's followable in terms of a plot and doesn't go off in too many weird tangents. And Bill Conti is the score for this, who like did the right stuff and just so many great modern scores, and he started doing some of that in here, not as over the top, I'd say, as some of the other scores you're used to from him, but taking some of Tchaikovsky and some other kind of classic concertos, and he mixes them into a different soundscape or a different kind of arrangement that always works pretty well. So I think, again, like PG movie, a lot of this actually hasn't aged terribly. Except for making the Nazis fun, which, in hindsight is like, okay, maybe Nazis shouldn't be as fun. But this is also the age of, all the kind of like retroactive stuff that I think Craig grew up with a little bit more of like, hey, we're reflecting on the war, but we're also trying to humanize certain elements of it. Obviously not of a Schindler's List mindset, more of a prisoner of war in a pretty nice provision camp. Literally in the first scene, the guy shows up and says, hey, let's talk about, we'll jump into the plot here, I guess. First scene, we open with a guy trying to climb into the camp. He gets shot. How did the opening find you, Craig? Of just like visiting this, were you instantly like, this is going to be a bad movie or this is going to be a good movie? Because
I was just like,
with the rest of the movie.
I was like, okay, this is a tough place, man. Be careful
Right.
inside Camp Soccer Town. It's going to be rough if you try
Stakes
to get
are
out.
set high. Yeah, the stakes are very high in the cold open, and then it cuts to the titles, and then it cuts to a long, windy. It's not Shawshank inspired because it's pre-Shawshank. Maybe Shawshank saw Victory and was like, we should put this in our movie. But just a long, winding drive of a car around the camp to establish the stakes. What's cool is that it was a real set. I did find that pretty like refreshing.
It was really impressive. I looked at it, it was 3 acres that they filmed this in Hungary. I imagine that a lot of this was because of, we're going to find out later that the stadium is in Hungary, where they didn't have any floodlights, had to really film this at a old timey location. But I was really impressed by the set that they had with this thing. It looked massive, and must have been very awkward for some person in Hungary in late 1970s, 1980s, driving by that and being like, what the hell is going on over here? But yeah, no, the set was really impressive. Yeah.
And, it's that time in American television and movies where you are like 2 generations removed from the greatest generation, but the Nazis you won. So they have routinely been used as the punching bag in various TV shows. I mean, Hogan's Heroes was a show that was on when I was a little kid, and it was also about POWs in a Nazi camp, but it was all played for jokes. It was all played for shtick and for jokes. So it's kind of funny that people who were much closer to the actual war were completely not only tolerant but quite accepting of this content in the 80s, where in the 2020s it feels jarring and like, Why
does.
why are we having Deutschland über alles playing? Why do we have this entire like Nazi processional before the game? But at that time, when you'd think they'd be more offended, it was more accepting because it's like, no, we beat those guys.
Right.
It was a very strange thing. Is like, who is like, eventually we meet one of the characters, just like Von Steiner's like, why do we have to make this Nazi a Nazi with a heart of gold? It's like, because that it was jarring to me. Like, it definitely took me aback to be looking at that.
It is not slapstick in that sense. It is nuanced, which I think is, again,
Yeah.
credit to the script team. Is like they at least made a story that's somewhat nuanced, that each character has their own kind of viewpoint, or at least want and wish, and they do mesh in the end. But at the same time, it is the push and pull of those various factors that I think they did an actual decent job putting on paper and actually comes across on screen. So I mean, that's again a win for this film. Is like they put it down and they picked it up, which a lot of films you see like this just don't come together, especially with all the pressure that was on this one in terms of people pulling against each other and that kind of. It comes across pretty well on screen, so that's something that I was pretty impressed with. And so yeah, we open with the weird shooting scene. Long drive into camp. General shows up, who I don't think see for the rest of the film, but is essentially there to say, "I'm here to check for the Geneva Convention to make sure everything's okay." So we feel okay about the camp a little, like, oh, at least the Nazis are like pretending to care about the Geneva Convention, which is great. And then we meet the British boss there in the front and get a sense of kind of the power structure happening within the camp a little bit. But really, the movie kicks off right after that when we see a report to roll call and we see John Caine. I'm sorry, John. Uh, uh, we see Michael Caine. I was thinking John Cleese and Michael Caine, and it got melded up in my brain somehow. 80s British dudes. Too much Faulty Towers, not enough Victory right now. So we see Michael Caine and Sly Stallone come off a field with a ball. There's an interstitial with the guard where he wants to get it back. And we get a sense of kind of how he deals with problems and how, Michael Caine's character deals with problems. The name of Sly Stallone's character, this is Robert Hatch, which feels like where they kept writing Hatch a Plan, and then they just were like, that's his last name now, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
Escape
Michael Caine's
Hatch.
character is
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking too.
John
Yeah.
Colby, and they're both captains, so that they have equal ranking within their
Right.
stations. But one is a U.S. citizen who has signed up under the Canadian Army at that point as an enlisted, which was kind of a thing going on at the time based on when the U.S. entered the war. And when they're setting this, we don't know. It makes some sense. And then Kane's character is part of the English outfit that's mostly making up the camp, and why there's an emphasis probably on soccer versus more American games, at that time. So interesting setting in terms of that. Did you guys find the general gist of that introduction to be something that held true for the characters, or did you feel like it was kind of they got to establish who these guys are and they're just jumping us in within the first 5 minutes, which again I love about movies from this period, is like they don't really mess around too much. So like, we're going to get you to the plot of it and then we're going to move it along.
Yeah, I mean, right. Guy walks up to a field, recognizes really it's a Nazi fanboy. That's what you have,
Right.
And Max von Sydow's character, he sees one of his favorite players and wants to go over and have a chat and be like, "Hey, I played for the German team," and from that is hatched this plan that always seemed kind of
Hatched. Okay.
Why are we doing this? The why really escaped me. And then when they were like, "Oh, well, it's going to be great for German propaganda," then I'm like, "Oh, okay." Of course, I'm watching a movie, so I know that won't be true, but I guess that's justifiable. But yeah, I mean, it's a lovely enough reason watching these guys kicking a ball around on a dirt road for him to come over and say, let me create this entire giant protocol that's going to involve my army and relocation to France and eventually a massive escape.
Yeah, it wasn't entirely believable in a way that it unfolded too. It was just like, all right, how is everybody buying into this, and why is everybody okay with this? Is what I kept thinking as the movie kept going along. Also, to be perfectly honest, what first came to mind within the first 20-25 minutes of the movie is I quickly realized, one, I need subtitles. Two, it's primarily for Sly Stallone. I guess it's been a while since I've seen
Wouldn't talk
Rocky or
about-
seen anything with him, but in this movie with beautiful accents, the one that I had the most difficult time was with Stallone of all the characters.
And, you know, it does occur to me, Drew, Michael Caine's motivation actually is he's hungry. It was double rations that really got the negotiations rolling.
Yes.
Once they got to that double rations, he's like, okay, I'll get my crew together then.
Exactly.
And you know, he did the character work to figure out like what is my motivation, and like I'm actually going to signal that. So again, like I get they made the right conditions here for this movie to chug along in a way that I feel like is positive, and I think puts it above that, you know, C grade for sure right away. Gives it a big thumbs up there, you know, in terms of just telling a story that actually involves the game at the center of it. So yeah, obviously this plan gets run up the chain. There's various scenes in it, you know, cut into the movie of von Steiner, played by Max von Sydow, running this up the chain of command to make sure he gets those Chekhovs, to your point. So to become Chekhov guns that go off later. They are Chekhovs that become Chekhovs.
There you go.
But yeah, we move along to there's got to be tryouts. So there's, you know, a little more of the power dynamic in the camp. Then let's talk about, hey, who's going to play here? You know, everybody's running around the field. There's, you know, a few former Ipswich players are mixed into this film in various roles, which were actually in Europe at that time, playing in the Europa League, the highest form of European competition at the time. Champions League came later. And you had just other very famous players, right? Where he's, hey, let's do tryouts, and a ball comes over to a guy who's just sitting there on the sidelines in his little outfit, and Mr. Pele gets up and starts to kick a ball around, and you're like, what the hell? Nobody told me Pele would be in this picture.
Can we say? I mean, maybe I'm in the minority here. Can we say Pele's acting skills are not nearly as good as his soccer skills? Is that a fair assessment? And was I the only one thinking that?
Maybe.
Okay, I came at it from the sliding scale of athletes acting and thought that he was actually pretty good for an athlete who are normally wooden and horrible. At least he had the one funny line, right, which we'll get to, I'm sure, when they've got the game plan. And you know, I mean, he didn't really fake that well being out there with his hurt hand. But
I think that's maybe that's a good point, is that, like, you know, and something you and I, like, I'm sure, could keep in mind going forward. Maybe when it comes to professional athletes, it's fair to grade on a curve, right? Like you can't immediately compare them to
the top of this curve, though. Are we saying O.J. Simpson was the best of the curve, or are we putting Peyton Manning above O.J. Simpson? Not anything else about O.J. Simpson. Just talking about his acting career. He was one of the best athlete actors of all time. I think he
comedic treasure.
Nordberg, just solidified the fact that he was actually a great comedic actor. I put Peyton Manning probably in that, like, Mount Rushmore of athlete actors, only for acting. Let's be very clear. Only for acting, not for anything off the field or
and if that's your top, I have to go The Rock above that.
Ooh. You think, in terms of the box office and career, for sure.
Like, he's actually been a legit good actor, and I mean, he was a college football player.
He would have been an NFL standout if he didn't throw out his back. I mean, that's the story, right? As he was he was playing with Warren Sapp and those guys in Miami, and he said he had back injury in college, and that led him eventually to the WWF, which is now the WWE. But that's how he took that career path, was he was going to play in the NFL, and that happened. So I would agree with Craig there in terms of high level athlete. Also, honorable mention up there in the Mount Rushmore would be Terry. Former Terry Crews, yes.
Yeah,
Chargers.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good shot. That's a good shot. Yeah.
He's up there too. So I'd say Pele's notch below that. If those are like the S tier and then there's an A tier, maybe he's in between the A and the B tier up there. That's where he is.
Also, Drew, I know. So talking about the scene where, you know, Pele shows off his skills, and eventually we have Stallone, like, taking part in this game, wanted to get attention. He's like, come on, like, I want to be part of the team. Ends up being a little too aggressive. I'm sorry, but Drew, I'm going to have to bring up the first yellow card of the show. I know we're getting ahead here.
Oh, no.
Bringing up the yellow card right now.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yellow card.
So, Craig, I actually specifically bought, like, a little
slow on the sound
thing. Yeah.
Amazing.
Dedication to the for YouTube. Cesar actually pulled out a yellow card, like, out of a referee slip.
So, Patch, so Stallone, when he's taking part in this game. He's going back and forth. He says this is a game for old ladies and fairies, and what my brain thinks is like, what do you mean by that, Hatch? Specifically, the second part of that comment there,
Right.
when
Yeah.
talking about soccer. So anywho, a yellow card for Hatch for the comment, a game for old ladies and fairies. Yeah.
How about a red card for his two-handed tackle of
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah,
Or
his-
outside of the comment, that's it.
Your American football style
There we go.
Michael Caine only didn't pull a red card. He
Even-
didn't have
even-
one provision, and Hatch wouldn't have known what it meant. That's the other reason he
Right.
didn't red card him for that. He wouldn't know anything.
Craig was thinking that I was like bringing out the cards specifically for like tackles, and I was like,
Yeah.
more so.
Yeah,
about
it's like,
comments.
okay, yeah, unfair
Yeah,
tackle,
physically.
definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the tryouts at the very end of the montage, I believe, he just straight up tackles a dude. And then Michael Caine kicks him out and is like, get the hell out of here.
A yellow
It
card
was
for
the
this
one
situation, you get-
LOL
you get the right-
moment I had
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
movie for sure. Was when he
Yeah.
just like, what are you doing, you idiot?
I think that one makes the trailer too. I think that's in the trailer where it's like, that's how you sell the movie to Americans is like, he tackles a soccer dude. Great, I'm in. It's like, that makes total sense for that time. Where beer ads were still mostly about women in pools. That's, the time we're in. So it is, Cesar is totally correct there. I think he's over the line a few times and like, again, this guy is maybe performing dialogue that he was given. Also, maybe, friggin' in like stuff that is definitely not parlance for World War II, if they were even trying to do that at all, which I don't think they were. But, a lot of his dialogue seems to be very self-inspired. Hey, I'm a writer, I'm writing, kind of thing. So then we get through the tryouts. He's obviously not part of it, but Hatch has a different plan that he's hatched
Mhm.
over to escape. And this is parallel to the rest of the film where Hatch's whole thing is just trying to get out. He doesn't care about anybody else, trying to get himself out watching guards in his free time, doing timing, here very audibly counting out loud like they wouldn't hear you and know what you're doing. Again, another little character flaw from him, but he loves to telegraph, and he telegraphed right to us through the film, which is this guy only cares about getting out of the camp, right? Craig, how did you find his motivation and the contrived, I'd say, hoops that they make us jump through, probably mostly in this part of the story where it's about an escape plan and it has a lot of different levels that, again, feel rewritten with the story to increase his character's presence as opposed to take us away from the soccer, I guess, mostly. How do you feel about the plot structure there, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we need to have the second act escape and recapture because that's Sly's big solo turn through the movie.
Right.
Everything else is in the context of someone else, but that's the time he gets to take off his shirt and do the whole, like roof crawl under a fence and whatnot. So yeah, I just need to get out of here. I'm on the Canadian Army. Okay. Like there's so much of it is just unintentionally funny, but as such, I found to be quite enjoyable as a result.
It's the only slow parts of the film, but it's refreshing to see that because so much today they just like would leave this out and then you just like show up in a bathroom. Like later on they'd be like, okay, we're gonna break out, here's how we're gonna do it, and like just like throw it all out like they'd planned it all along. They'd like reverse heist movie it probably these days. But I did enjoy the fact that they kind of at least took you on that journey of like, here's where it goes and what happens. But I found it to be a bit of, there was like 2 to 3 beats of it where there could have been one, I think, that got us quicker to where he gets back on the team because they pretty much he goes to their superior and he's navigating the exit plan to try and get these guys out. That's the whole plan, is the other guys in the camp won't make it out, but once they figure out the game's going to be off site, they want to figure out how they can get these guys out of the unit. And that becomes the B plot of the movie, on the side of how do you form a soccer team to play the German national team, essentially. How do you do that in the sense of the logistics of both things at once? So the team gets the special provisions, better rations, as Craig was saying, a separate place to practice. They get a nicer beds, I'm assuming, probably where the soldiers would bunk as opposed to where the captives would. And then they get given uniforms, some fancy red jumpsuits that they wear out in the yard, and they get heckled by the other inmates, which was kind of a fun scene to show.
I was
they're
looking for the
now.
Adidas 3 stripes. I was like,
Right.
where are the 3 stripes?
I know, right?
Yeah, they supplied the army, right? That was the deal. Adidasar. Look up your history. It's muddled. We don't know. But it's still a good
A
apparel
good
company.
montage, definitely good montage too, which it feels like the old timey workouts that like Mr. Burns from Simpsons like would have
Yes.
orchestrated, like with like when it came to that workout montage for the team.
It was
Yeah, I like
it was that. It
the
was like
lay down, burst up and go. Like that was
yeah. If it
great.
was like full Zucker Brothers comedy, this is where Richard Simmons would come out and be like, "Let's whip you guys into shape. Let's do some sweat into the oldies." That's yeah, but it was definitely some like older stuff where you're like, oh yeah, even in the '80s they saw this as actual exercise, but then they're doing like '80s take on '40s exercise, so it's like somewhere in the middle of like, so it's still very ancient to this time period now, where you're like, wow, okay, compared to maybe it's like proto CrossFit. I don't know. A lot of it was using body weight and some fun little passing drills, but those fun tropes I'd say that made their way in here, but were almost cute in a way because they are sentimental to a time period and kind of a function of people just hadn't shot the sport in a major feature film like this, especially the people doing it who were mostly American crew, I guess, in terms of the people really pushing and pulling the strings. But you also probably had some European mix in there, and they had three different production outfits based on the UK, the US, and Italy, all putting into this movie. So you had a lot of different crew that were a part of this, but it comes off pretty well, and all the things stick. We end up in I'd say my favorite scene of the movie, just based on this podcast, and so we can set a little time here before we hurl towards the match, the rest of the plot line here. But the tactics scene where they actually put on a chalkboard how they're going to play, and Michael Caine is trying to instruct them on how he's going to play, and he is captain / coach, by the way, a player manager, which was common actually in those days. I'll go to Craig and then Cesar. How do we feel about the tactics? And then obviously Pele's got a fun little cameo here.
To everyone in the audience, I got a lovely Google document from Drew, a couple days before, and I saw this in there, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever actually thought about tactics in a piece of fiction before, because the result was going to be whatever they wrote. So
Yeah, right.
so the tactics themselves are ancillary to the cause, but I thought very aggressive to go with the four to go with the 3 forward formation and everything through the middle. Okay, good idea. I like that plan. And get the ball to Pele. I thought that should have been before Pele took the chalk. I thought that should have just been the entire thing, was like, we've got Kim, get the ball to him, let him score.
Did you not see him juggling the ball? Yeah, did you not see him juggling the ball like earlier in the movie? Just give him the ball.
I mean, I feel like he was standing out in tryouts too. Like it just, I'm guessing during training, like he was probably standing out as the player on the field, seeing as he was the best player in the world. So
at that time, he's hanging out in Budapest, and he's like, I don't know what we're doing. We're just making a movie, man. I don't know.
Also, really quickly, at the risk of making this too tactical, it did look like there are a bunch of numbers like going forward. But back then, actually, if anybody's really interested, read Jonathan Wilson's book, Inverting the Pyramid. Very good soccer tactical book, kind of the history of soccer tactics. Way back in the day, you'll find that people would use like 2-3-5, like 3-2-2-3 formations, and like especially like in like the 30s, 40s, 50s. So like you look at that and you're like, what's going on here? What's happening with all these like numbers pushing forward? It's like, actually, that's just what happened during that time in that era.
They just swarm played like kids. Yeah, they almost
exactly.
It's kind of like watching like U12 these days. Like they know what they're supposed to do, but they almost can't help themselves. Like it kind of feels like that. So it is interesting, and it was kind of like 2-4-4 almost the way he inverted it. But like the idea was to push it down the channels and then push it to the middle where Pele was standing. That was pretty much the formation of it. And then Mr. Pele gets up out of his chair and comes and grabs the chalk. What does he say, Craig?
I do this, and then 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 I score.
Then he laughs, just like Craig. He laughs in his face.
Technically not wrong when we consider the outcome of the movie. Technically not wrong at all.
He pulls it off. He wasn't wrong. He had the right play. They could have run it 6 times. I don't know why they only ran it once.
That was my whole critique as well. Yes.
There's some other kind of famous names to throw out a couple that have pushed in. That the biggest British one would be Bobby Moore of the time, who played Terry Brady, who's a winger, and then Ozzy Ardiles. I cannot not mention as a Spurs fan, Ozzy being one of our great players there in that period that actually helped us secure trophies. Wow, who would know of such a thing these days? But for Tottenham, that was the case, and he gets imported along with a few others. That you see the heart of Michael Caine's character is he's going to also use this weird propaganda experiment. He is not as in the mindset of escape, but he wants to use this as an opportunity to live a little bit while they're confined and pull in as many people as he can. So he pulls in people who were from the Eastern European sides, who he knew through his connections, and said, these people, the Germans even say, we don't know of them. We don't list them, and we, pretend like they don't exist, essentially. And he says, can I bring them along? And so you get imported a few guys, and one of them is Ozzy Ardiles, who's Argentinian, so ended up there somehow. I'm not sure how, but he ended up in Eastern Europe, along with a couple Polish players and Belgian players as well that are part of the squad that kind of makes up, again, a few other Ipswich kind of names of the day. But it is really an interesting kind of look at, hey, let's actually try and tell soccer. They actually did tactics in a movie in the 80s from soccer. Like, this is pre MLS. This is this is NESL's dying, essentially. The MASL is rising, or MISL at that time, right?
Yeah,
Craig?
MISL, right.
And Craig and I want to make a show all about that, so tune in for our eventual success with that. But there is a weird period in soccer here for sure, but it is interesting to see them actually pause and like do a thing where, hey, let's talk about this, and do Pele's credit. They credit him with most of the soccer influence in the movie that he fought for, to say, here's how I think it should look, here's how it should actually look on the field, and design what they called soccer plays. Shout out Layman Donovan, running soccer plays, an old theme of the main show of this network. But one of those things where it did actually look pretty good from that standpoint, that it played well of the era. They used of the era balls where they had the old leather stitching and the cool stitching down the front. But this is kind of where I wanted to unload a few of those things in terms of where we're going with that and how the
But
rest
who
of the movie
needs
rounds
that
out here.
though? When you have Sly Stallone, like pushing aside those fancy Europeans, he can catch the ball better than anybody else can.
Oh,
At
it's
a
just a
training.
great,
Accidentally.
Yeah.
yeah. He is
It
a
just
great
so
ball
becomes-
catcher. There's just no question about it. He's just catching balls left, right, all over the place. But you mentioned the bringing in of the Eastern Europeans. This is the tie that I had known about for years and never like exploited, which is that one of the Eastern Europeans is Polish World Cup superstar Kaz Dana, who was
Oh yeah.
Poland's best player at the time and wound up being the original captain of the San Diego Sockers. And
Really?
he,
No way.
yes, yeah,
Wow, that's
Kaz
fascinating.
Dana was an absolute superstar. Now, he was like 35, 36 by the time he started playing indoors. So he played about 5 years for the Sockers. He won, like, I think it was on the first 5 championship teams. And then Cesar, he actually tragically died on the highway on the 15 at age 42 in the middle of the night, running into the back of a parked truck. So Dana died at age 42. He was the first soccer to ever have his number retired, and he was number 10. So the Sockers haven't they haven't had a number 10 since the 80s. Yeah, but so yeah, he was the original Sockers captain. He was I don't remember if he was a league MVP once. I believe he was a league MVP once, but he played alongside Julie V. He and Julie V were like the tandem, the great scoring tandem for the original San Diego Sockers championship teams.
It escaped. I knew it was another Eastern European player, and I was like, I forgot exactly the name, and I was like, I feel like one of these guys is that guy. And Craig, just as a great historian of San Diego Sockers, and a big reason why a lot of that stuff I think is out on the internet. Thank you for sharing that organizationally when you had the chance, Craig, with everybody and from the mic as you do during matches currently. It is pretty cool, and that's where, again, Cesar, as Craig and I delved into a little bit of the history, and I read a little bit myself. A lot of the Eastern European players did come over during that period because they felt like they had a chance to make more money and just get in front of more eyeballs and get out of what the growing Russian and Confederated presence that was happening in the area, that pushed out their particular type of people or whatever. It is fascinating if you ever read into early American soccer during this period, because it is a total different world from where we're at now, but also kind of its own thing that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Button it there. Let's narrow towards the match a little bit, I guess.
You got it.
The the main thing that we're doing here is we're looking at Hatch trying to build a breakout plan. He, as you said, Craig gets uncaptured, makes his way out, breaks out during a shower scene. Makes his way out of the camp, gets on a train, goes. So we at least get to see the bits of how he does all of this, as opposed to just showing up in Paris and being like, "How did he get there?" Has a conversation with a Paris-based team that's part of the resistance that wants to break these players out. And the match has been decided to be moved to Paris to make it a bigger spectacle, to have TV cameras, to try and use it as a propaganda tool against the local population, to show them Germans are so strong they can beat even these players that you used to watch, and those kind of things. Obviously, Hatch then figures out that he has to get recaptured to tell them that they're going to be broken out, otherwise nobody's going to know about the plan. And so this is where we set up, I guess, the second half, or the second act, or that what I would actually call the third or fourth act of the film, where we get towards the match. Yeah. So, how did we feel generally about Hatch's, part of the movie here where he had to actually do acting?
Well, I'll say really quickly, when he met up with the resistance, quick little yellow card, another yellow card. He already had a red earlier today, so whatever, but he now gets another yellow card. How he treats Renee, I know. So one of the things I know this isn't a big part of the movie, but it stood out to me. Maybe this is what happens when a woke young individual like me watches a movie like this. But the bravado of a Hollywood leading man of that era. What do you say? He's like, I think he said, like, "Look, lady, I said thanks, like, no offense," because she wasn't like talking to him and she was quiet to him.
You'd be a lot prettier if you smiled. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. I just wanted to talk. It's been a long time since I talked with a woman. It's like, all right, buddy, let's
creepy,
chill
dude.
Let's chill. Let's cheer here. It did not. I guess it maybe at that time it felt differently, but watching it in 2024, I was like, I'm not rooting for you, Hatch. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of hope you get caught. I kind of hope you get in trouble here. Anywho, that just that caught me a little off guard there with Hatch leading up to the match.
The part of that bothered me from the same level is that she is required by the script to admire him.
Yes, exactly.
And not to completely reject him. And put him further into a corner, which is what would have happened in a more modern film. But instead, she must covet him. And he is shown to be a gentleman later by only getting close to her without actually, getting all the way in there. But of course, once we get to the match, there's a number of cutaways to her specifically watching, like, oh, I hope he's okay. I hope it goes well. So
exactly.
It's like, how could you not love Sylvester Stallone? Did you see those abs in the shower scene?
Didn't you see? Yeah, didn't you see him crawling? Did you see
I almost feel like the match scene was shot before this scene, and then she didn't know that she'd be like, oh no, fuck this guy, boy, you tripping, get out of here. But that's how Craig's totally right. If it was shot today, again, that's another thing you'd rework, and it'd probably be for the better, which is she would just be like, nah, I'm just here to help you get out, man. That's all I care about. I don't want to help you get off. I want to help you get out. That would be her thing. But he is very much every bit of what you remember about the worst parts of movies from even 20 years ago. You watch, you're like, oh yeah, that's problematic. It's not the way we talk to people. And that's, should be reflected in film. And I don't think it was ever viewed that way, but I do think, to your point, Cesar, it is it's just expected. And to your point, Craig, it's just written in of well, you have to have a woman who cares about him, and it's still a PG movie, so we can't go too far, but let's make it to where we, want to show that he's liked by everybody and loved by women and, children or whatever, which happens in the end. So I guess, but it would be much more interesting to watch the scene with Michael Caine's character, and in his motivations and how he would speak to her, I think would also be interesting at that time, and see how they would write that versus obviously Sly's character is Sly with, just a couple shades of different veneer over it.
something occurs to me before we get out of this piece. And it really just did the bing, just light bulb for me, which is I wonder if the very first thing we see in this movie was something that was like the last thing shot and got tacked on during the course of a Stallone
Right.
rewrite, because they needed to show that it was hard to get out of the prison camp.
Yes.
Because they were so meticulous in every single stage of how he finally got to the resistance, and wearing the armband and teaching him a line in French and his passport. And, it's like, again, today they'd probably yada yada a lot of that. But like, this is the main time that Stallone, other than the final game, gets to be athletic and gets to be, that big movie persona that he has been at this stage of his career already. And so in order for that, like, if you don't have that original scene, it's like, come on, everyone seems real cash here. Why is this so hard for you to get out of there? And instead it's like, no, we're going to spend like 18-20 minutes showing you how he's going to get out of there, because this is Sly's star turn.
What you're saying is this could have been a more simplified movie if it wasn't Sylvester Stallone being very difficult about how this was all going to be going about, and how
Correct.
the ending of the movie was, and and that he really has to emphasize this is a tough man. He's doing tough man things.
I think 50% of it improves the movie because it shows depth beyond just one subject matter. It is like a silly, like, let's play a soccer game with Nazis kind of thing. But like, the end result is something that actually mixes in a little bit other tones of like Maltese Falcon, and like the tension, and like the idea of like that there's tension here of trying to get out of the camp, and like, is he gonna, like, we know stories now, so we're so cynical and being like, he's gonna make it out, he's gonna be fine, he's gonna do that. Like, we know that that's how movies work. But like back then, the way they were making it for an audience, I do think there was some more of that in those scenes that now falls a little more flat. But to your point, I think it does add a little, just different shades of the palette that I think are kind of fun to live in for a minute. But yeah, that's when we're like, that's a get up and go to the bathroom time. Like when he's trying to get out of the camp, you're like, you'll get out. I'll just go to the bathroom.
Yeah. And I know we got to get to the match because we got to like wrap up with the next like 15 minutes or so. But like, I do wonder if, like, I think Craig alluded to this like earlier, that there was something kind of like, it seems funny now to watch it now, but back then it was probably Sylvester Stallone being like, I'm super cool and hip and buff, and like it was almost as if like a 12-year-old like straight male like wrote this. And maybe that's like what's like that, and that's why we find it a little entertaining, because like, yeah, that's super cool. He got out of this tough prison, and he gets to show his abs, and he gets to be the cool hero. And maybe that's what kind of makes it funny to us. But back then, for him, he was probably just like, yes, I'm this super cool hero, and I'm very masculine and awesome, and that's what seems funny to us. And could have been.
I'll do the thing I did in Rambo, but without the man, you know.
Yeah.
All right.
Play this fairy sport.
Exactly.
So we get on a train, which Nazis, that's, sometimes good, sometimes bad, usually bad. But we go to Paris, and we end up there, and there's just Nazis everywhere to really emphasize that they have checked out every stage of this. They actually inspected the locker rooms, and they wanted to. There's a tense moment of they've built the plan on breaking into the visitors' locker room, and we see an inspecting team saying, but is this the locker room for who? The away team or the home team? Usually for the away team. Well, we're the home team because we own Paris. So this is the away team. So they allow for the plot to continue in that sense. Which, again, was kind of like, oh, the movie's over.
Just great, hilarious if at halftime the Nazis' locker room has a hole.
There's just a bunch of French guys looking under like, oh no.
Sacre bleu!
Oh no, that would be the real ending of the movie that I talked about earlier. Yes, when the jig is up. So yes, essentially we move into the film. We, as Craig pointed to earlier, it is an awkward moment now because again we don't glorify these things as the way that we don't is what we say because we don't want to promote it and we don't put it out in the media. We'll just show the end of a speech or we'll show kind of like the end of a thing happening, but we won't show the whole processional. Then that's, but I think it is actually effective at showing like these people are so brainwashed that they're in here, and it also establishes the townspeople are not as brainwashed. They're not as into what they're saluting. They're not about this. They're not hailing. It's just the German landed gentry that's taken over, that's who's promoting this. And obviously, the team with full stretched arms catches you awry a bit, especially in what's supposed to be a comedy too, right? Like that's kind of the tonal shift here that happens. I'd say
Yeah.
that is a little bit odd. And then we come back to okay, we're about to play a soccer game, and the teams are out there. With our Nazis in the black uniform, which helps, kind of put the evil spin on it. And then um, our Union team has a white top, blue shorts, and a blue or a tricolor strip down the chest, which reminiscent of the French flag, or the Union Allied forces in that case. Started off pretty hot. This is a decent match. I felt like when we started kicking a ball around, I was like, oh, this is actually going to look like a game versus a lot of soccer movies where it's, close up on a player and we lock in on that player, even though that's never how games actually work. We actually see a ball kicked around a bit. I was pretty refreshed when I was like, oh,
yeah,
man.
it was pretty clear in comparison to some of the other movies that we've seen that like you did have legitimate former current pros involved in this, and I was actually pretty impressed with the gameplay, especially since consider how they're wearing old timey boots too, and that they're like those jerseys they were wearing were like not exactly the thin jerseys that modern players wear now. Back then those like heavy cotton jerseys would like literally get like soaked with sweat and would like literally weigh you down because of how heavy those things would be. So I was actually really impressed with the gameplay. Like it was pretty impressive.
It occurs to me that this might be, and I mean, obviously there's research that I'm in no way willing to do to back this up, but might be the highest ratio of actual players.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a good question.
Right.
In a movie, I'm sure something like, Any Given Sunday or something, they hired a bunch of college players, but that was, again, mostly like close-ups and such. Here you had actual, Premier League level players. You had world-class players. Kaz Dana scored a goal in the World Cup in 1978. Like, you had real players out there. So you wound up seeing a lot more real play because I'm sure with all the footage they captured, they were able to get some, like you said, some decent ball, except for one notable exception, some decent ball on tape.
Yeah, so some of the best German players of the time there as well. So you had some real talent on both sides of the ball that made this look real because it was again. I think Pele his biggest contribution off screen was getting enough players to agree to do this with him that made it feel more organic when it came to the on-field stuff. Besides, again, obviously Hatch being a grafted on, gorilla glued on piece of accoutrement as we're here in Paris. But yeah, it's kicking around, and we can start to feel the pull of the plot in some ways in the game, as you do in sports movies. I think it's very rare where a sports movie surprises anybody who's going to win or lose a certain game, or who's going to go down or come up in a certain moment. This is no exception, I would say, generally, in that sense that it starts off 1-0 Germany, and it's just a very basic cross into the box where Hatch gets fooled, comes off his line, and gets caught in the middle and gets a header in on him. And, couldn't be simpler to cover if you're a basic goalkeeper who's played in the game before. But as we know, our man is not. He is subliminally literally put in this movie and then been the loudest thing in it, is how it feels. They were trying to slip him by us, but he's not too sly, unlike his name. So, here we are down 1-0. Any surprises here at this point, guys? Are you like, okay, how much worse is it going to get first before it gets better?
No, I mean, no surprise at all whatsoever. And also, yeah, Sly Stallone, obviously, like I don't know what they were exactly anticipating by throwing him into net, as if he would somehow magically do well, despite the fact that yes, he can catch a ball, but I'm sure his positioning is terrible and has no real history of the game. And what does he say in the movie? He's like, where do I stand in the corner? Like if your goalkeeper is asking
stand
that,
on a corner kick is what he asked Michael Caine 3 times, and the first 2 times Michael Caine's just like, fuck off, man. I don't want to deal with this.
I think you might have some issues. I think you might have some slight issues.
Yeah, I mean, just acting as a bit of an accelerant. I mean, we're going to go. Here's the thing that really surprised me watching this movie for the first time, knowing that there were so many soccer players involved in it, that the Allies find themselves down 4-0 in the first half. And I mean, we've got the corrupt ref that's not going to call anything. So Germany gets to commit every foul in the universe. And if anyone breathes on a German player, it's a pen, it's a foul. Hatch is uniformly terrible, right? Like,
no bright spots at all.
Yeah. I mean, good penalty taken. You would almost hope he'd be dumb enough just to stand in place. And then the ball might have hit him in his perfectly sculptured abs. But instead he decided to throw himself to a side. But, we're down 4-0. And I'm going, okay, this is a sports movie. It's literally titled Victory.
Yes.
but you're down 4-0 to the German national team. How are you possibly going to come from 4-0 down?
Yeah.
This feels unrealistic to me.
Right. It's one of those where they and the plot that's in motion underneath the current and underneath the visitors' locker room is that the French resistance has now moved in place to unload the pool from the center of the locker room, or the mass tub, if you will, that then drains into the sewer to then allow the players to escape through the sewer. And that was the plan all along. That had been set in motion from when Hatch came back. He had to fight his way out of confinement. They had to break a goalkeeper's arm to get him on the squad. Yeah, it's all fun and games. They get him on there, and they're set to leave. They're in the locker room talking about the game, blaming each other a little bit, and then the hole blows through the floor. And everyone has the same realization. We got to get out of here. This is our opportunity. That is bigger than the game. That's what we're doing. And they make it all the way into the sewer before a couple of the players decide they don't want to leave. They think they can win. They think they're better. There's been nothing in this game to show them that they are better or could win this game. Besides the fact the ref's corrupt, and that if he actually called a couple fouls, maybe they'd have a chance. But nothing. Cesar, where are you at emotionally here?
The power of soccer. Let's unite and play. No, get out now. What are you guys doing? That's exactly what came to mind right there. I do not care.
It's like dodgeball, where it's actually the dumbest plot line that wins, where you're like, oh yeah, they should have just quit. They shouldn't have kept doing this. This is bad.
100%. This is the low point of the movie, in my opinion.
Yes.
It is also the single funniest thing when this one. I think we have a chance. Go now. Let's try and finish the match.
Like Monty Python almost.
I mean, seriously, it's the Black Knight, right? It's 4-1. Yes, you did get a goal. Now, the second funniest thing would have been if he was like, "I want to finish the match, but you, Hatch, you keep running." You go that way. We'll have half a chance with an empty goal compared to you. It's so that would have pleased me as well. And the fact that Hatch agrees to go back on the field is the single most ridiculous thing of them all, knowing the character that we've met for 2 hours at this point. So absolute laugh riot to me that they file the fuck out. By the way, Nazi guards, what's up? You don't hear the boom.
You heard dynamite, and you're just like, nah.
Here comes the boom.
They're just warming up.
Yeah, they're like, boy, they must be really mad in there. And then, they leave the locker room, right? That door opened back up again. They left no one took a look inside.
You would think that they're like, no, let the game go on. We're up 4-1. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, nobody comes back to Nazi leadership by the way, there's a giant hole in the bottom of the visitors' locker room. I think they might have tried to escape.
It was halftime for them too, Craig. They were out having a smoke. They were out there having a smoke. That's what the ability of suspending of my belief I can do here. But I would say I totally agree. This is one of the weirdest parts of the movie, where it was like, everything kind of makes sense except for this weird part of it, which is in the end, they don't even use, by the way, we'll get to here in a second, but spoiler, they don't even use this escape route. And so, yes, this is wholly almost unnecessary, where it may have been better off if it didn't happen or didn't come together. And then they figure out a plan B, honestly, but they needed some sort of emotional turning of the tide. And this is the one place, if you wanted to call a literary red card, Cesar, on the group of writers here, I would say they, didn't really need this plot device to stick, and they could have just gone a different direction that would have been more believable. Pre-halftime, Pele got injured, by the way. He got taken out on what should have been a red card. Obviously, they're not calling fouls, and he kind of either broke or splintered his arm or did something. So he's there walking with a little pigeon arm for the rest of the movie. Go ahead. Sorry, Cesar.
I would say it's just what's even less believable is them actually somehow making the comeback in this game and somehow fighting back after looking so terribly poor in
Well,
that first half and yeah, building up to that moment for Pele.
Well, let's call a spade a spade. This is the biggest collapse of German defense, honestly.
Yes, exactly.
Since Berlin itself. This is just an absolute embarrassment.
The wall fell
for the Germans. I mean, honestly, what's going on, guys? I mean, let's pack the box a little bit. Can we have?
Yeah.
By the way, you get unlimited fouls. And you're still letting these guys roam through the field free? I mean, this is truly a choke job by Germany.
Yeah. They come out, they score a few goals. My man Ozzy is key to a lot of them as Pele's kind of off the field. He's probably the premier talent maybe on at that point, besides everybody else who we've named previously. But it was generally a lot of good, well-worked goals, just kicking the ball around, finding your space, finding your pass, making soccer happen in a way that was like, oh, they're actually doing the sport in the movie, which you don't get all the time. The Germans reassert. You have some kind of tackles and runs, but they scrap their way to about a 4-4 comeback where you get the 4-3, you get 4-2. They're notching it back up. And I would say the cool part between 4-3 and 4-4 real quick, just to put a peg in it for 20 seconds. You guys know those NFL films where it's like the old orchestra with like the slow motion football? I felt like they did that here with like Bill Conti's score and some of the soccer plays where I'm like, oh man, like you don't get like NFL films for soccer because we just, they didn't coincide the same way that America's taken to broadcast and that sport becoming more prevalent. But it was kind of like a cool, almost throwback of something that you felt like should have existed in a certain sense that I thought was kind of cool. But we get to 4-4. We get back to tied because that's what the plot allows us to do. And then, oh no, they were offside. We, get an offside disallowed goal. There's no VAR, obviously, in the 30s and 40s in Germany.
Yeah.
So,
and if there was, it would just be playing a German propaganda film. So
right, it would just go to like some weird anti-Disney rhetoric. Yeah. So it's again, we get stoppage time. American audiences watching this going, there's extra time. They said there was 90 minutes. Now there's more time. Now they can win or they can score. And we get Mr. Pelé coming off the bench with his little chicken arm. And we get to see the play. We get to see them run the annexation of Puerto Rico, as it were, where he takes the ball and does everything he's supposed to do. And getting literally punched in the process. Craig, how did this great cinematic move, this is the crowning achievement, I'd say, sports-wise of this film is probably this contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And eventually, getting to the Chilena and like with the broken arm, super impressive to go for that. Probably unrealistic, super impressive to go for that. And, you got to score on a beauty or else it's going to get waved off anyways. Right. And, but Pele scores, crowd goes crazy. Oh my God. The thing I didn't expect, and I wonder if it was strong-armed in by a certain American superstar, was we got to have one last charge down the field, little bit more time. Penalty. I think a deserved call. It's time for Germany to pull this out in the end and win it 5-4 by beating the worst goalkeeper in the history of humankind, Mr. Hatch.
Literally an orangutan.
A swinging open hatch at this point.
And as
a hatch door.
And as Craig noted earlier too, like I saw the IMDb trivia as well, that Sylvester Stallone insisted that he should score the game-winning goal. Writers were just like, no, your goal. How do you score the game-winning goal? You're a goalkeeper, and they wrote in this scene for him to stop the penalty.
Yeah. It makes too much sense because there's also like 10 minutes of stoppage time and what should have been 4 minutes of stoppage time, which again, refs are totally corrupt. So we don't know. Like maybe that's the way they're going to run it, is like run until Germany scores again. But yeah.
One more note, because I know I'm sorry with notes, but here's my second indoor soccer connection, which is that
all right.
the German who takes the penalty that is saved by Sly Stallone is Werner Roth. He was a teammate of Pele with Cosmos, but he moved on to become an advisor to the Major Arena Soccer League and was kicking around the MASL. I mean, I met him one time in the pub at Pachanga Arena in the Stella Lounge. He was like, "Hi,
Really?
this is Werner."
So you've hung out with one of the actors in this film?
I have hung out, and here's the kicker: I didn't know he was in Victory when I met him. And he was just this guy, Werner Roth, that I knew nothing about. And then, like, when they do the big close-up where they stare in at his eyes, and then I saw the name, I'm like, I think what? And then I looked it up, and like, if you type in Werner Roth, his MASL stuff is going to pop up, pretty high up because it was reasonably recent. So I was like, okay, all right. We got Kaz Dana on this side. We got Werner Roth on that side.
That's fascinating.
There's always a San Diego connection. That's what we're finding out with every one of these films. There's some way that we can connect to this through the universe of San Diego Punto Futbol. The final shot is that player celebrating getting carried out onto the streets by the fans, but why are they getting carried out? Oh no. And then we see the fans also being part of the resistance, changing the players into little disguises, and then credits where we get kind of like a cool fade to blue, and then the cool title cards that you got back in movies I'd say 1989 almost. It feels like it kind of died right there on the decade switch. But where you'd see, so-and-so name, and then show them a clip from the movie, kind of TV style. On the end of that, we have a couple questions we asked before we get out of here. One I'll just generally ask, was the film better than the sum of its parts? And then we're going to assign a couple ratings here.
In my opinion, yes. Definitely talking through it, there's some very clunky things that are very, very 1981 about this movie, and very Sly Stallone. And I think Sly Stallone generally brings the movie down. I think his overall rating is negative for the movie. Obviously, they needed him in order to make the movie. I'm sure that was the case. But I both enjoyed it, and I found, as anachronistic as it was, the 1981 attention to detail. Like you mentioned, the score would have been a lot more prevalent in a more modern movie. There's a moment where the bus is arriving, and there's just a minute of a gate scraping open, and then the of the bus driving in, and just kind of that lugubrious pace to things. The detail of the escape, so on and so forth. Part of that, I'm like, but then part of that is that's the way they used to make movies back in the day, is they wanted to ground it in that sense. And I did find enjoyable we'll have this, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about not only the plot to escape them, but all of the potential obstructions. Are they going to be able to tunnel? Will they find the right place? All of this, we check in with all of it. And in the end, it was no, you just needed to win the crowd's heart. And if you do, they'll storm the field. They will carry you out. They're actually going to have a whole bunch of spare stuff that they brought along with them that they're going to give to you. And this is all going to work perfectly, which means that the actual title of the movie should have been reversed: Victory to Escape. If they don't win, there's no field storming and there's no escape. It's just back to the locker room and try to sneak down the hole again, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
perhaps
moral victory. Yeah, for sure.
I'll say perhaps draw to escape, because only soccer fans would consider a draw a victory.
True.
But
true.
but I agree with a lot of what Craig was saying. That when you consider a lot of the stuff behind the scenes when it comes to making this movie, I didn't think it would be. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. I also quick shout out to. I mean, one of the things I know it's one specific thing, but that shot of Pele right before he does a chilena, right before he does the bicycle kick. I know they cut to a different, a different angle when he ends up hitting that bicycle kick. But I don't know why, but that seemed incredibly cool to me. That very cool, slow mo, right before he scored the equalizer. I love that. I love the extended intro, which for me, a millennial man, I see an intro like that, I'm like, oh well, this is different to me. This is cool. This is it's not. I know sometimes I feel like when watching movies or TV shows nowadays, it's they gotta hit you in the face within the first 10 seconds, or else I'll look at Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky. So it was really cool to see this kind of extended intro, which feels a little atypical from what you would possibly,
and slows your heart rate down.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I disagree with this movie, but for the most part, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
That's awesome. I think I'm in the same camp, guys. I think it was refreshing in certain ways, in other ways, very much of its time. But certain things that we don't see in modern sports movies, and I think it was one off just because the production that was making it was a very mixed group of people with very different ideals of how to make a movie. And I think you ended up with a one off that's going to probably stand the test of time as something that's a little bit problematic, but generally going to be, in the pantheon of good to great soccer movies. I wouldn't say it's the best. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I'd say it's somewhere in the middle there out of what we've watched. But the fun question we get to answer before we walk out of here is player ratings is usually a thing we do. And this month, we're not going to rate Hatch because he'd be like a 35, I'm pretty sure, or like 20. I don't know
If he was
does
lucky,
that well.
if he was lucky.
Right. So we thought, me and the art director here, Mr. PunkRock Paint, Travis Peterson, thought, let's do Pele. And
Yeah.
over Craig's face here, we
fine.
just took the card from FIFA. So the art department's on holiday, sincerely art department. And we honestly think that I in this movie he was 99s across the board. He was
for sure.
so much better than everybody else,
Guaranteed.
especially physical 74. It should be up there. It should be like a 95. He got punched in the chest while he was injured in the arm and scored a goal. So totally fun. The other only question we got to round out on is what is your score line that you give this film? And then we'll get out of here. Craig, you are our guest. We rate it however you feel. Is it 0-0? Did you feel bored? And was it a draw that went nowhere? Or was it an exciting 3-2 or a well-drawn 1-1? How did we feel about this match, Craig?
Oh, that's a very, very interesting question. I am going to say, like I said, this was more entertaining than I thought it would be. There were elements of it that were not perfect, but that I can't call it a draw. I think this movie won. I think I think the soccer itself, just the fact that the soccer is good and not bad. Right. In the movie is a win. The plot is fine. John Huston directs it. It's good enough. Michael Caine, whatever. Like I think I'm gonna say 2-1. I'm gonna say a 2-1 win for victory.
I'm in the same exact camp. I wanted to initially call it a 2-2, or initially like a 1-1 tense but entertaining draw. But I think that, just like Craig said, I think the fact that I enjoyed it more than I thought it would, I think that there are so many little things I didn't actually really appreciate about the film, makes it feel like the most narrow of victories, but it is still a victory nonetheless.
There
which
we
the film
go.
escapes with.
It escapes with a victory. I'm in the same camp. I'd say 3-2. Just for me, I grew up watching films of this era, so that's where my film education started. Was heavily 80s based. So for me, it just feels like home. It feels like I'm excited to see a movie that does soccer and does it with some of the best players in the world at that time in that sort of space. Again, Conti works magic for me. He's kind of a little bit of a pet project of mine. So I'd say generally for me, that feels really good as a space. So 3-2 is how I'm scoring this one.
Oh, okay.
Kind of 4-3 was what I thought about. And I was like, yeah, we can't go that high. There wasn't that many goals. There was like 3 really good things and 1 or 2 things where I was like, yeah, I would definitely change this if I was at all involved in this production or modernize it at all. But generally a lot of really good beats and a lot of fun stuff. This has been awesome getting to reconnect with you, Craig, on a film and talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for jumping on, man. Yeah,
great. I really appreciate you guys
this evening.
Yeah.
But,
and
is there anything else that you want to plug?
Well, I was just going to say, Cesar, I see you around occasionally in a press box here or there, but it's great to see your smiling face again. Drew, of course, all the way out there in Wisconsin. Anytime you come back, it is a joy and a pleasure to be able to reconnect with you in person. If you happen to be watching this in San Diego and you like sports, you can listen to me Monday to Friday, 10 to 2 on the Annie and Elsten Show with Annie Halberd, 97.3 The Fan, available on the Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube right here. You're watching this on YouTube, so streaming on YouTube, you can find us there all the time. Padres Hot Tub is my Padres podcast, and our community, which has just grown and grown. You can find that wherever you found this. You can find Padres Hot Tub if you happen to be a San Diego Padres fan. And stay tuned for 2025. Plenty of great things ahead.
Yeah, awesome. You can hear Craig on the Golazo Network as well, as the MASL season is now being broadcast via CBS as well in their extended coverage. So pretty cool to hear you on there. Same network I hear Champions League on. Pretty cool to hear my friend Craig broadcasting a game for the team we all love, the San Diego Sockers. Cesar, we're on Blue Sky, man. You and I individually. I'm at
there.
your store. What's your hit up on Blue Sky?
Cesar H Football, Cesar Hernandez. Find me not posting that much on Twitter.
No, not
Find
really.
me only my articles on Twitter. I'm a little bit more active on Blue Sky, but trying to not use as much social media as much as I used to back the day. But outside of that, just find my articles about anything and everything North American soccer on ESPN. And that's what find me. And also trying to control my cat. Clearly, we got to wrap up because I am doing my best to hold her back because she is just
The forces of
fighting
the
me right
universe
now. If you saw me
pulling
just
this
like every
show
now and then
apart.
moving around, it's because this cat is just not happy with me right now.
We have you going that way. We have Craig going towards the commitment. My office here is turning into an active construction zone for the next 30 minutes. So
Amazing.
we love you guys, and thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you in the theater. Thanks so much.
Where Cesar and Drew have fun. Club Deportivo Movie Club.